return of the Mark Coleman protege, AJ Dobson, looking to make a second time out with the UFC and taking on Superman Armen Petrosyan. And Matt, when we look at this matchup coming up this weekend, AJ Dobson is really known for his boxing, really slick combinations. You saw that in the first round of that UFC debut, his last time out, and he was taking on a guy who you could have bought at like a penny stock stage about a year ago, and now he's worth about $20 a share, and in a year it could be $100. I'm talking about Mamba Jacob Malkoun. Wow, what a win over Nick Maximov last weekend. But for Dobson, he looked great in the first round. He could defend some of the long-range takedowns. He was really able to win out with a lot of his striking. And then in the second round and the third round, it was like Dobson was walking around in quicksand. He just couldn't figure it out. He didn't watch enough cartoons in the 90s, and Dobson really did struggle in that respect, and he lost that O on his record. So what did you make, Matt, of Dobson's last performance, and I guess some of the performances that he had leading up into the UFC?
He does look really good on the feet, but that's the thing about both these guys. They both look really good on the feet, and that's why I do think this has the potential to be like a fight of the night that is buried on the prelims, because for AJ Dobson, he is going to come out, work the jab, get into the pocket, and try to have a lot of his own success in that pocket. And I guess someone like Armen Petrosyan is going to be really interesting, because Petrosyan, we all know how good of a kickboxer he is, we all know what his background is. He's not the most aggressive guy, though, for what his background is. It's really interesting to see, because think about a guy like Alex Pereira, a guy who has, now, yes, granted, he's one of the greatest kickboxers of all time, but still, you think about a big, strong kickboxer like him. He marches guys down, walks forward, goes to the leg, then to the body, then to the head. It's really that three-distance approach, if you will, and the three-level approach, whereas for Petrosyan, he can kind of wait for the fight to come to him, and that's always been the strange thing to see, because he does have really effective footwork, and normally when a striker has really good footwork, they can lead their opponents into their power shots. Think about a guy like Robert Whittaker, and I know the examples I'm using right now are people at the top of the division, but still, Petrosyan is a pure kickboxer, and that is his background. I love the movement that he is able to display on the feet, but it feels like it's unneeded at a certain point, and that's always been my thing with Petrosyan. I really do think that if he does let his hands go at some point throughout his career, yes, that might make him more susceptible to the takedown, but also it's going to help him accentuate the best part of his game already. And against a guy like AJ Dobson, you would think Petrosyan's going to come in with a much more aggressive mindset, because now, is Dobson the more well-rounded of these two athletes? I would say he is, but I still don't think Dobson has the mindset of, okay, I'm going to put on my wrestling shoes now. I think Dobson's going to go into this fight and try to at least strike his way into that clinch before he goes for his takedown attempts, because if he does just start shooting from a long distance, I do like the movement out of Petrosyan. I know he said it might be overutilized, but he's a hard guy to get close to, and again, it might make it so that his fights aren't as exciting as you probably initially assumed that they will be, but it does make him hard to get a hold of, and against a guy who might try to grapple him, that's always a good skill to have.
Armen Petrosyan has one sketchy detail to his record, and if you look at the 5-on-in, he is of course 3-2. You go back, he was the AMC Fight Night's lightweight or light heavyweight champ. Be crazy if he was a lightweight champ, but light heavyweight champ, and he loses to Hassan Yousufi. That's a good fighter. You've seen him fight a lot of good talent on the regional scene. Loses that fight by knockout, and then a couple of months later, he goes out there and has another fight, and that's kind of the craziest part about his overall record. Is it 7-2 or is it 6-2? You go over to Sherdog today, it could be 7-2. You go over to Topology, they consider it 6-2. And the win that he had on his record that's in question, and I found a great article. You know Jay Petrie from Sherdog for his good work with Fight Finder, the Ashkar Mojarov stuff. Well, he had an article that came out earlier on in October about Mr. Petrosyan and his fight that he had against one Yakov, and in that fight, it is sketchy business. He couldn't find the fight. The promoter didn't really seem to have it. The management team didn't really want to talk about it all that much. And then somebody finally slipped out an unlisted video. It was on YouTube. And if you go back and watch it, it's weird. So
just Draymond Green punching Jordan Poole, and they're saying it's Armen Petrosyan.
Well, it wasn't as cool as like a GSP or Draymond Green Superman punch. But for Petrosyan, he's taking on Zemniakov, and he goes across and lands a left body kick, drops his opponent, and then follows it up with ground and pound. The opponent stands up, smiling, and then that's the end of the fight. It was really weird.
But none of the skills he demonstrated in that fight are actually back-upable, if you will, by other fights that he's had. Like, there was nothing in that performance that makes me think, okay, he can't land switch body kicks. Like, that's something we know he's been able to do his whole life.
And the best part about it is he obviously gets the win on Dana White's Contender Series. He's a decent favorite in that one against Keolan Kovalev, and he wins that one by knockout. And then his next time out, he beats Gregory Rodriguez by split
oddly
decision.
Bad fight, though.
Yeah, it's not a great fight, and I thought Gregory Rodriguez won the fight, but regardless, it's a win on Petrosyan's record. He goes in against Caio Borralho, and in that fight, Petrosyan, after beating Gregory Rodriguez, who had looked very good in the UFC before the Petrosyan fight and has looked very good since that fight, Petrosyan's a plus 200 underdog against Borralho. And I thought, what? Really? Like, I know we picked Borralho to win that fight, but you go back and you look at it, he defends 1 of 5 takedowns, so Borralho gets 4. 10 minutes and 9 seconds of control time. The judges scored at 2:30:27, 1:29:28. He looked pretty darn good, pretty darn bad, and he couldn't defend a double leg all the way across the cage. Like, his takedown defense hasn't gotten much better since he's come into the UFC. It wasn't his strong suit outside of the UFC. We know how good Petrosyan's striking is, but I look at a guy like AJ Dobson in a matchup like this, trains out of Immortal Martial Arts. He's had Matt Brown and Mark Coleman in his corner before. His win over Wesley Golden on the regional scene, you're able to get the fight down to the mat. A no-hook rear naked choke, he doesn't have his legs around him. He's just on the side cranking for a rear naked choke. He also got that submission on Dana White's Contender Series to book his ticket into the UFC. It's not something that works against the highest level competition, but it has for Dobson. To go along with his boxing combinations, all this to say, Matt, I'm not high on either one of these prospects who are over the age of 30 at this point.
I'm really glad that you had said that, because that was going to be my final remark on this fight. This should be a fun fight, I think. I genuinely do believe that. Now, I don't know what either guy's ceiling is, because it really is difficult to project based on what their current skill set is, but I think this will be a fun striking fight. Now, I kind of tip my hand. I do ever so slightly favor Petrosyan, just because I do think his movement is going to make him very difficult to take down. Now, I don't know if that's going to help him offensively a lot in this fight, and honestly, it might make for a bit of a stale striking matchup between two guys who you wouldn't assume would give you a fight of that caliber, but I still do like the movement of Petrosyan. I think he moves a little bit too much, but in a matchup like this, I actually think that might be a benefit to him.
And when you do look at Petrosyan, even in the fight that he had, against Gregory Rodriguez, it was a success in the striking to the takedown of Rodriguez. You look at the odds in this one, Petrosyan open minus 210, minus 225. You look at it for Dobson, open plus 180, still about there, plus 190 or so. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprised at us as they are to you. And with a guy like Petrosyan that big of a favorite with that Rodriguez win, I'm going to say over under 70% Superman.
I think it'll be over.
Superman it is over. So 1,040 total votes, 86% Petrosyan, 59% by knockout for the 14% that have Dobson, 52% by knockout. Matt, I kind of like the odds on AJ Dobson just based on the fact that I like his striking and tight. I like the hooks of Petrosyan when he is backing out, so I think that he's going to have a lot of success there as well with his kicks, but I think Dobson is the more well-rounded guy. Didn't love the fight that he had against Malkoun, especially you could have called one of the rounds at 10-8. He gets taken down fairly easily in that one. Petrosyan's cut from the same cloth, so if they decide to strike, I think Petrosyan's a little more well-rounded. But again, I don't see these guys having a giant high of a ceiling, and if you do like the underdog in this matchup, I'm not going to fault you whatsoever.
I've also got Petrosyan, but again, it's going to be really interesting to see what the odds are based on his future opponents, because it is really going to be matchup dependent to see how big of a favorite he is, because we know what his skill set is. He can defend takedowns with his footwork, he's a very skilled striker, but guys who we can't really use those two skill sets to exploit, they're going to have success against him, so I do like Petrosyan in this fight, but again, it's really going to come down to what is his next matchup after this fight.
Is it 6-2? Is it 7-2? We're still going with Superman. I'm not that naive. Armen Petrosyan to get the win. 5 for fighting the tune. Matt, we have some big time matchups coming up this weekend, including the 2 title fights up at the top that you're not going to want to miss. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.